Mr. Alan Alda has brought his considerable wit and wisdom to TV and Broadway, as well as to a New York Times bestseller. And now he has a new book, Things I Overheard While Talking to Myself, a compilation of answers to personal questions of himself. And Alan Alda is here. Welcome.
They're mostly questions.
No,
I don't have many answers.
So typical journalism style,
Yeah.
journalist style. I go
What's
right to
the
the back
most-
of the book.
Yeah.
know,
Oh, you
and
did?
I
Oh.
get, I start with the last chapter first.
Yeah.
But I loved it because you said, don't look for a hidden meaning in life. But why do so many people do that?
Well, why did I do it? I spent about a year and a half torturing myself with this question about what's the meaning of my life. I think we do it because we're problem-solving animals. We figure, well, there must be an answer to this. I'm not sure there is, but I searched in all the different ways. I've been, in a way, I've been lucky enough to live through most of the things that are supposed to give meaning to your life. Love, art, family, even celebrity and money, and all kinds of things. Service to other people. I've been active in philanthropy. But although they all give you their share of meaning, or at least they did me, no one of them did it. And I get the impression, at least the way I ask myself the question now, I think I'm at a stage now where I'm thinking what Marcus Aurelius said, that now is all we have, is what I'm beginning to think is what gives me this sense of satisfaction of as long as I can just be with whoever I'm with and be aware of what I'm doing.
Well, this was really all prompted by a catechism event that I did go back and start from the beginning. I want you to know. An event that you had in Chile where you almost died. You're at the top of a mountain. We don't need to go into the gory details, but you had this horrible intestinal disease.
Yeah.
And
you got gorier than I was going to get.
Yeah.
Well, I was dying.
Yeah, you were dying.
That much of my intestine was dead by the time this wonderful guy operated on me in the middle of the night in a small town in Chile. And he saved my life. I was maybe a couple hours away from dying. And boy, was I glad to wake up. I was euphoric, as I think most people are who nearly die and come back. I bumped into the governor of New Jersey, Governor Corzine, and I asked him, "Did you go through it?" He said, "Oh yeah, every day I feel." There's this amazing feeling, no matter how much you enjoyed life before, and I did. Now it's different. Colors are more vivid. I hear things I never heard before. People are more interesting. It's almost impossible to sit next to a boring person because I find something interesting in them.
Are people, or are we kidding ourselves? Well, he's gone on to a better place, and things that we do to imagine that this isn't all we have.
Well, I don't know. See, all I know is what I got here. I can't be sure of anything else, and I can't. I mean, I'm pretty sure I'm here. There are philosophers who say you're not really here, but it's the old burlesque sketch. If you're not in Philadelphia and you're not in Toledo, you must be someplace else. So this is a reference that maybe falls on deaf ears, but there was a burlesque sketch like that. The thing is, I get this feeling of not wasting my time by noticing my life now. And in a way, I think the meaning of life is life.
We spend a lot of time pondering these kinds of things here, but I'm wondering if you ever imagined yourself in another civilization. I was looking at that horrible front page story in the New York Times today, the woman from Sierra Leone can't get morphine for breast cancer. She's horrible. She's lying on a mat dying. Yeah. I mean, she's not pondering the value of life.
No, she isn't. No, this is a rich person's problem, relatively, relatively rich. I mean, those of us who have a roof over our heads and today's food are rich compared to, I guess, 3/4 of the world. And in my own life, there was a time when I couldn't get work as an actor, and I was a doorman, I was a cab driver, I was a clown in front of the openings.
They all sounded good to me.
Yeah. Well, just to make enough pocket change that day to be able to save a few quarters to add up to pay the rent. When you're doing that, you're not worried about the meaning of life. But it's odd that once I got to the point where I'd accomplished things, that's when those accomplishments didn't really give me the sense, looking back on them, didn't give me the sense of meaning, of purpose, of kind of lasting satisfaction. So it is a question that does occur to a lot of us, and I find it occurs a lot to young people. In spite, like people in college, people who are not desperate just to get by for the day, but they're planning a life, and in a way, they're planning a life the way I started to plan a life when I got a new life, when I got a second chance at life, and I thought, well, I'm starting out. In a way, I'm like a kid again, and I want whatever this life is, I want it to count. But not to count in some way that is keeping score the way somebody else would keep score. I want it to count for me, so I know it counts. And that's very tough to do.
The book is largely built around, you talk about young people, about your commencement addresses, your talks, as it were.
Talking to my grandchildren, to my kids.
And a lot of these things are very personal. The commencement addresses themselves are very personal. And going back reading it, I thought of all the terrible commencement addresses I've ever heard where people, the challenges ahead, and all that junk. You just want to kill yourself when you get out of there. But you took a much more direct approach.
I did. It was always personal.
Instead of get a job, it was think about this.
Yeah, and I would often encourage them to think about what mattered to them, what their values were, to think about meaning in their own lives. And then when I look back on it, once I came back to life, and I was looking at these talks, thinking about what I'd said, I realized I was in all the urging I was doing of those kids to think about values, and I was really talking to myself. I bet most of the time when we give advice, we're getting behind a foghorn that's saying, this is how it ought to be, and we're really talking to ourselves. So that's what I mean when I say things I overheard while talking to myself.
Well, you must have liked your own advice because you repeated it. One of the things in there...
Well, sometimes I challenge it. Sometimes I argue with it. Yeah.
One of the things I loved was a story about you as a kid on a railroad yard or somewhere, and then you get into a fight, and they're throwing the tin cans, and some razor blade comes flying at you, and you said stop, because it was it was part of a vaudeville act or a comedy act that you'd seen your dad in. And you said, you know what? That wasn't what you meant to say.
No.
I mean, so your point out of that is say what you mean, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
But a lot of people take offense when people say what they mean.
Well, that's true. Well, that's what's hard about being alive, is you have to do two things at once, all the time. You have to be aggressive, but you have to be kind. I call it the benign aggression. But you got to be forward, but yet you can't be too forward. And everything we do is like that. It's like, I was talking to a friend the other day, and I said, this is really funny. I don't like to go fishing because I don't like to kill fish,
I agree.
But I eat fish.
Yeah, exactly.
I let somebody else kill them for me. And he said, yeah, right. Okay. I said, I'm a hypocrite.
Yeah.
He said, well, the nice thing about being a hypocrite is you get to hang on to your values.
What's this been like for you, though? You are a celebrity. People have sought out your opinion because you were a Hawkeye Pierce on MASH. You've talked to a lot of medical students, medical schools. I mean, does it get in the way, or does it give you a platform, a privilege, as it were?
Oh, you mean being well-known?
Is that a pain in the neck?
Well, it can be physically dangerous to be well-known. I was doing the science program, Scientific American Frontiers, which we did for 11 wonderful years. And once we were in the Leaning Tower of Pisa to do a story about it. And the guy who ran the place took me into the tower, and he said, and he knew me from television, and he said, this is a very dangerous tower because it's leaning over so badly that there's so much pressure at the center of it, it won't just tip over, it'll explode. I said, oh. And we start up the stairs, and I see a sign that says, no one permitted beyond this point. He said, do you still allow people up here? He said, oh, no, but we made an exception in your case.
I didn't think that's where you were going with this. But
you can get killed from being a celebrity.
You certainly can. Alan Alda, pleasure to meet you.
Thank
Things
you.
I overheard while talking to myself.
Thanks.
Loved
It was fun talking with you.
All right, and when we continue, remembering Paul Sullivan.